एकम् अक्षरम् हृदि निरन्तरम् भासते स्वयं लिख्यते हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहम् इति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा चिन्वता मज्जता पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो देहं मृण्मयवत् जडात्मकम् अहं बुद्धिर्न तस्यास्त्यतो नाहं तत्तभावशुक्तिसमये सिद्धात्मसद्भाव ओहं भावयितः कुतो वरधिय दृष्टात्मनिष्ठात्मनो सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं सोऽहं स्फूर्तितया अरुणाचल शिवः पूर्णो विभाति स्वयं with Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been meditating on the verses of Anma bodham, Atma bodham, relying on the Tamil translation by Bhagavan. It's time to reorient ourselves a little bit. We are in one of the classifications, the third segment of the work, the verses 1 to 5 being an overview after an introduction to the qualification of the sadhaka, 4 verses on the overview of Atma bodha, followed by the world 6 to 14, the nature of the world from dream, slowly the various metaphors covered those verses. We are in the third segment verses 15 to 30, which are the Shravana verses for the Jnana Marga. The Shravana has to be followed by Manana also. But first of all, these verses are the Jnana Marga Shravana verses to be received from Adi Shankara himself. So we are in that segment. To recall the three verses that we have seen, verse number 15 was how that because of the association with the Panchakoshas, the Atma, which is actually absolutely pure, looks to be with this form of Panchakoshas, like this Spatika, when in the association with colored cloth. That was verse number 15, as to how these are the Jnana bodhanas, which we have to listen as the Shravana verses. Manana has to be done independently. The Nididhyasana verses follow from 31 to 41 or so. Those verses will be the Nididhyasana verses. Nididhyasana is to do the dhyana and practice the meaning of Atma bodha really. So those verses will be on the nature of the self, which when we hold in meditation will remove the vasanas and take us closer and closer to the anubhava or anubhuti of the Atma. And the last segment, the 40 and odd to the final 60 and odd verses, that is the anubhava of the sage, the jnana anubhava verses, which is the usual course that Bhagavan also adopts, that in the end, the jnana anubhava of the rishi who has given the work is given. Now we are in the jnana bodhana segment. The 15th verse it begins. 15th verse is about how, because of the association with the Panchakoshas, the Atma, which is pure like Spatika, just like Spatika looks colored in association with the colored cloth, this also looks to be of these forms. Then how to delineate that Atma? We remembered how in Appalapatu it was said, that was what was mentioned in verse number 16, that just like you dehusk the grain of rice from the paddy, you remove the husk from the paddy to get the rice. Similarly, the Panchakoshas have to be dropped, have to be freed. The consciousness has to be freed of the association with the Panchakoshas to find and discover the self. The 17th verse was, though the self is present everywhere, though the self is omnipresent, it does not reveal itself everywhere. It can be experienced only in the intellect that is pure. This morning we were reading from the Mahayoga, the work by Pandit Lakshman Sharma ji, where there was a reference to the egoless state being abidance in the Atman, that the egoless state, the culmination of it, there was a reference to the Taittiriya Upanishad, where it has been declared that the experience happens in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, in the intellect, as the sadhana is done to dehusk, as mentioned in the previous verses, that the dehusking of Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya and Vijnanamaya is done. One comes to the end of Vijnanamaya, and when we wait there with the dhyana or the tapas, the Anandamaya or the Karana Sharira starts releasing the contents, releasing the thoughts, and one by one, when the Karana Sharira thoughts are all erased, then the Atma Swarupa, the Atma Shakti, starts shining directly on the Vijnanamaya Kosha as Aham Aham. So That is what was mentioned as a Jnana Upadesha. How the Anubhava is there. The Bhrugu's Anubhava in Taittiriya Upanishad is the experience mentioned in verse number 17. Engume Endrum Irupinum Anma Engume Anma Ilagal Illai Tungamam Buddhiyileye Poliyum Nidal Socchamam Vastuvil Tondrum Vahai. So it is in the pure intellect alone that the Atma Swarupa is first felt. And the next verse, the 18th verse, is that all the Udal, Karvi, Ullam, Odu Buddhi, Mayai Idave, Vidaver, Avatrin Virutti, Udane, Evaikum Sakshiyam, Endru Manmavai, Avaik Arasan Polari. That the Atma is not affected by the actions of the other koshas and Maya also, which causes the whole actions in the world. So it is like Avaika Arasan in the darbar of a king, how the king is a mere witness to the courtiers, to the jester, to the ministers, and the actions of all others, those who have come for justice, those who take punishment. All those actions happen before the king, but the king himself is an unaffected witness. So the Atma is an unaffected witness. So these are the 4 Jnana Bodhanas that we have covered so far. That is, because of the association with Panchakoshas, the Atma, which is actually untainted, looks to be tainted. Then how to find the Atma? Dehusk. Get freed of the koshas, and if you remain with the Vijnanamaya kosha, eliminating all the thoughts, the Karana Sharira or the Anandamaya kosha will also be removed of its contents. And once the Karana Sharira is eliminated, once the vasanas are all eliminated, the Purna Vastu, Soham Spurtitaya Arunachala Shiva, Purno Vibhati Swayam. Where does he shine? He shines in the intellect, according to Shankara. We will discuss that a little bit more when time permits, that how that Bhagavan says that it shines in the heart, and how Shankara there at that point in verse number 16, he mentions, in 17, he mentions that it is shining in the intellect. We will see why this reference is there a little bit later. In fact, we had occasion to discuss that this morning satsang, because the content of Mahayoga was such that we could go into it. But right now, it's not the time to go back into that. The 18th verse is the Avaika Arasan, that the Atma is the unaffected witness. We can always recall that in Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, we had a verse on how one of the ways of looking at God, who God is to look at him as the unaffected witness. And the Sishya says, "O Guru, I am the witness of my thoughts." Then the Guru says, "So you are the light then. That if you remain as a witness to your thoughts, you are the light of the self or the Ishvara, the only God." He says, "You are the only light." Because there is no difference between my thoughts, your thoughts. In that witness, whatever thoughts come, one remains as the unaffected witness. So those are the 4 Jnana Bodhanas we have received. We can go on to verse number 19 and 20 today, which continue, and both these are connected. One verse is on how the Atma is untouched by the instruments. The movement of the instruments does not touch the Atma. That is verse number 19. Then verse number 20 turns the table around. That all the instruments are active only because of the power of the Atma. So these 2 verses can be meditated upon by us together. That all the actions of the instruments, they appear to reveal as though the Atma is also affected. The creation has really happened and somebody is really bound. But then that's not true. The Atma remains unaffected. That is verse number 19. And verse number 20, since the connection is there, verse number 20 is that all the instruments, all the koshas, they are activated only because of the Swayam Prakasha nature of the Atma Swarupa. So these are the two Jnana Bodhanas we are covering. Let us go into verse number 19. Karuvigalin Todil Kanda Aviveki. Karuvigalin Todil Kanda Aviveki. Karuthan Pol Tan Anmavai Kanban. Karuthan means doer. That he takes the Atma also to be the doer. Duridamai Odume Kankandunar Vili Chandirane Odugiran Enbadai Ottu. The Upamana, let us see first, because it is supposed to be a very beautiful Upamana and very practical. So let's go to the Upamana. The Upamana is that on a night, probably in the early monsoon, when the clouds are not so heavy, perhaps there is very good winds and lot of movement of the clouds. But when the clouds are moving fast, if you look at the moon, then the moon will appear to be as though running. So that is the Upamana. The moon is not running. We know that. If we inquire scientifically or if we inquire a little bit, we will know that the moon is not moving at that pace. The running of the moon is because of the movement, the fast movement of the clouds in front of it. Now, one can refer to the same, that actually what is happening, the earth is spinning around itself at a speed of over 40,000 kilometers a day and spinning around the sun at a terrific speed. So many kilometers per second it is running. But how does it appear? Actually, we are doing the running around the sun, but it appears as though the sun is rising and setting. So that is the illusory part there. That it is the sun is really not moving, that we are moving around the sun, but because of the nature of our perspective, we don't even feel we are spinning like that. We are on a ball which is spinning terrifically and which is running round and round the sun. We don't feel like that because we are not tuned to have that perspective. We feel falsely as though the sun is rising in the east and setting in the west. That is the feeling we get. But the Upamana here is even more clear, that on a cloudy night, when the clouds are all fast moving, not fixed, then it is the experience of all of us that we get a feeling that, oh, the moon is running away somewhere. That is the experience which we saw the last session also about the trains, that the relative movements of train in platform is very delusory, that you don't know who is moving. There used to be a comic called Tintin, in which there were two characters called Thompson and Thompson. They were detectives. And they are after a bad person, as usual. Tintin is the hero. And these people have landed up with a jeep, which is extremely slow moving. And the driver is, they are twins. And one of them is at the wheel and is driving it almost like walking speed, very slow. And on the side, Tintin passes by in another car at more than 100 miles an hour or something like that. And the feeling the person who is not driving is getting is that at that relative moment, he feels his jeep has stopped. So he gets down. He gets down from the running vehicle, because though it is moving, compared to the fast running, the car of the hero, who is also a boy, this jeep appears to be standing still. So he feels his brother or the twin has stopped, and he gets down and falls flat on his face, giving room for another moment of mirth for the reader. But that is the relative movement. That now coming to the Jnana Upadesha. The Jnana Upadesha is, it is the Karuvigal. That is, those are all moving. The Indriyas, the prana, the manas, the buddhi. These are the instruments, these are the upadhis. But then they are the upadhis through which we see the lokas. Like the Indriyas reveal the Indriya loka. The prana reveals prana loka. The manas reveals mano loka. The buddhi reveals vijnanamaya loka. And of course, the Anandamaya loka of deep sleep is there. But then the Indriyas are moving, the instruments are moving, and we feel the Atma, the Swarupa itself is moving and is a doer. Karuttan means doer. We all have this feeling that the Atma has become a doer. That is why we call ourselves, I did that, I did this, that fellow behaved cunningly. We bring it as the poli uir. So a little bit of what is the problem with Karuttan, how the error creeps in, and how we make mistake of imposing doership on the Atma is that whenever there is the seer and seen situation, Bhagavan says, you cannot really see the Atma Swarupa. You cannot really see the Ullapurul. In the verse 1 of Ulladu Narpadu, Bhagavan defines God as, who is God according to Bhagavan? Going to the root of that work, God is Ullapurul. So I was sharing with my mother and the other people in that room that how does Bhagavan define God? Bhagavan defines God that if God is not present at all times and in all places, then how can he be omnipotent or omniscient? Unless that omnipresence is there, how can he assure you something? Now, how can he assure you that you will exist? See, our experience is that unless, even in the world of possessions, unless we know that we possess those things, we can't enjoy the possession, isn't it? So the knowledge becomes very important. That unless we know that we are happy, other people will be thinking that this person is extremely well blessed and he is happy in the worldly terms. But since we don't know, we will not feel the same. We will be thinking of some other thing. All others will be thinking, Nandakumar is so blessed. He is getting 3 square meals, very good dresses, good place to live. Everything that a man can ask for is there. But I will be sulking, thinking of something else. That means the knowledge is important. So the Ullapurul can be experienced only when the knowledge is also one with that. If the knowledge is apart from the Ullapurul, that means sometimes it exists, sometimes it does not exist. Such a knowledge cannot reveal Ullapurul. This is Bhagavan's teaching, that God is Eppavume Ullapurul. He exists always. And to know God, see, without knowing, there is no experience for us. So to know God, you should have a knowledge which is one with Ullapurul. If it is away from Ullapurul, you cannot experience Ullapurul. Therefore, the error creeps in when we jump out as I with the Karuvigal which are moving. The moment we jump out from the knowledge which is ever present into the poli knowledge, Bhagavan calls it as pseudo knowledge or false knowledge, which is the poli uir. We are the poli uir. As soon as we become the poli uir, we get doership. The karuttan pol atma way. But do we really have doership? Do we really have doership? When everything is done by Bhagavan, when knowing Spurana is knowing everything. When identifying with Spurana, the Spurana itself becomes everything. It's not even knowing Spurana. When you identify with Spurana, then everything is that Spurana. This is the teaching of Bhagavan. But how do we look at ourselves? We jump out of that Ullapurul, we jump out of that existing knowledge, existence consciousness, and identify with the Karuvigal, with the Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha. And of course, we even claim I slept. I slept well. I am so different from you guys. See, even in the most difficult of my times, I used to have very good sleep. So we have pride over that also. There where we go into the Anandamaya Kosha and do nothing. About that also, we could have pride. Or we could have worry that no, I am so ill blessed that I have never had a straight day sleep. Last 7 years, every day 3 breaks, 4 breaks, deep sleep is never experienced. What a miserable life. Both these are doerships and they arise because the polyuir arises. That we are not identifying with the Ullapurul and Ulla Unarvu. Ullapurul and Ulla Unarvu are one and the same. But what do? We jump out of that and identify with the Karuvigal. And the movement of the Karuvigal, as we have discussed, these are like the specks. If you put on the Annamaya Kosha, then the time and space, that looks so huge that the places from where you are all contacting the group are also widely spread. And the duration of time, Bhagavan says something like, you have to be self-attentive or you have to do self-enquiry throughout the waking state. Vidyaji and I were discussing the other day that how duration is also a thought. The duration is just a movement of the Karuvi called the mind. Duration is really not out there. That when Bhagavan says you have to be doing self-enquiry all through the waking state, immediately there is the feeling that there is going to be 17, 18 hours of waking state. But as thought, it is just one thought. The 18 hours is only one thought. Now that is what we have to understand. From illusion to a better understanding, then removing that also and coming to the self. See the power of thought. The power of thought is that it can cover time and space like that if we really understand. And Bhagavan is asking us reduce all that to thought, and then from thought, which is also a Karuvi, which seems to be running, go to the ever-present unmoved self, that which does not move at all. Like these are all the sensory world is like the clouds. The prana world is like the clouds. Let's say the prana world, what do I mean by that? I mean the lot of emotions which are easily tackled by observing breath. All our emotions, jealousy, hatred, anger, shame, which is actually adding on strength to the negative and positive thoughts. That strength from where it comes from prana. So the emotional world, the world of emotions, that is heaven and hell within us, that Karuvi is a mixture of pranamaya kosha and manomaya kosha. And many of the things that we experience are all mixtures. Like when we look at somebody and interact with him as though he is an Atma, we have brought all those inner worlds to this world, which is really not there. It is only a sensory body. But since we differentiate him from other beings, that's a human being with an intellect, we superimpose the intellect into the sensory world. Whereas all one has to do is, you have to understand that the intellect is within. It is not in the sensory world. But these are the movements that Bhagavan is referring, that Shankaracharya is referring, that the movement of these instruments makes us feel that we ourselves are changing. We ourselves are always doing this and doing that and getting affected. There is a quote from one Mr. William Arthur Bart, I think, B-A-R-T, a motivational speaker from US. Very interesting that the quotation is very simple, that before speak, listen. Before criticizing, think. Before quitting, try. Before reacting, meditate. Before reacting, meditate or look at yourself. Something like this the quote goes. I am only paraphrasing. But what is the person who is saying those things? What is he doing? If we look at it, that is, before speaking, listen. Before reacting, think. Before criticizing something, before praying, forgive. Before quitting, try. So, from the outside, from the world, or from the logo of actions, he is bringing self-attention. Each of those times, these are movements towards the self. How do we say that? That before you speak, you listen. That means some guests had come. My sister had come from Chennai, and I was trying to show her an art which was going on in the TV as to the nuances of that particular thing that was happening. But her memory was, it had gone to Kerala 50 years back, where with father and me, we had gone and seen the same art form 50 years ago. And her mind went off to how my father used to take us for a stroll and how he used to be attentive towards us. That was her. Now, for a moment, the thought or the impulse was to continue explaining the nuance. But that I was listening to her, I understood that the same object had triggered different thoughts in her. So, unless I listened to her, how do I speak to her appropriately? My speech would have been disconnected. I would have been speaking about how nuanced that director was about that particular scene, which was not the trigger in her. The trigger in her was how our father had taken us to that movie so many years back, and we had gone for a stroll many times. So I dropped that and moved with this. What is the change? That before you speak, you listen means first you have to look at yourself and see you are so occupied with the nuances of the art, which is one of the things. But the other person has been triggered with some other thoughts. Unless you listen, the relationship or the conversation doesn't go anywhere. So that improvement comes from self-attention. And total improvement or total freedom from being disconnected with everything comes from total self-attention. See, if you look at that quote, each of those actions will be shifting from the other to oneself. If you look at speaking truth, if you look at acting ethically, if you look at bhajans, if you look at dhyana, it will always be moving from the other to the self. So once you start doing self-enquiry, you will see that all sadhanas, if they are spiritual sadhanas, will be a turn away from the non-self towards the self. That is how the sadhanas will start looking to you now. Now, therefore, you will not be carried away by the clouds. When you are not carried away by the non-self, you will not be carried away by the clouds and think you are being tossed around so much. No, you will start attending to the moon directly. And the movements of the clouds will not affect you. The movements of the curvy of the instruments, the sensory world may be going on at a pace. But you know that if you can reduce them to thought, then time and space are nothing but thought. And the movements of thought, if you go to the I thought, those movements are all still. But if you are carried away by the mind and carried away by the sensory world, you feel, when am I going to reach there? I have done so many things. When am I going to correct all of them? The same Atma, which is absolutely still and one with the pure self, feels that it is a doer and feels tossed about. Why? Because we are identifying, we are associating with the moving instruments. That is the verse number 19. The Jnana Upadesha is, when you are identified with the moving instruments, you feel you are a doer. When you de-identify from the moving instruments, Tannai Upadi Vittu Orvadutan Isan Tannai Unarvadam Mundi Para. The only way to come to the movementless, actions free, doership free self is to free ourselves from the instruments. தன்னை உபாதி விட்டு ஓர்வது தான் ஈசன் தன்னை உணர்வதால் உந்தி பெற தானாய் ஒளிர்வதால் உந்தி பெற. That is verse number 19. And verse number 20 is the explanation as to how actually all the instruments move. Now, what to do with the movements of the instruments? That is, we have now understood, if you detach yourself, if you free the attention from the instruments, then you come to the non-doer self. But what about all that? Bhagavan will explain to many people, let the thoughts go on. Let the thoughts go on. How does it affect you? So, they will keep going on. And many of us, while explaining the self, at some point, in some context, we would have explained that you abide in the self, the actions will go on automatically. Don't worry about them, they will all take place. But then the Acharya is going to take us to a Jnana Upadesha, which is going to go deeper. So let us gather ourselves and look at this Jnana Upadesha. What was the context? That one of the samadhanas given by the Guru is, how will my work for the family go on? How will my work for the nation go on? How will the work for my upkeep of body go on? All these are the questions we have, and the Gurus many times, Bhagavan himself in the talks would have given samadhana. Don't worry, act like an actor. Be like a play. How does it affect that you know you are so and so? How does it affect if you work as a gatekeeper in the drama, or a person who is holding the shield for the king in the drama? How does it matter? You know that you are not that. Like that you play in the world. All these supports would have been given. But then in this verse, a deeper support is given, where the plane is completely shifted. That is, ஞானவழி ஆன்மாவை நன்னி உடல் பொறிகள் மானதம் புத்தி இவை மன்னும் தமக்கு ஆன தொழில் ஆற்றிடுமாம் ஆதித்தன் அவிர் ஒளியால் மக்கள் தொழில் ஆற்றுவது போலும் அறி. The Upamana first. This Upamana is what Bhagavan has also taken in the Who Am I? And it is a very important Upamana. That how in the presence of the sun, the word presence is very important. How in the presence of the sun, all the activities are going on in the world. And in reverse direction, the sun itself, like in the previous verse, is not affected by the good and bad done by a person in the same sunlight. The same sunlight energy is taken. One plant is poisonous, another plant is a very beautiful food for living beings. Now, both the same sunshine is covering, but the sunshine itself does not get papa or punya. Now, this example is very important because it frees the boss. See, the common understanding we should have is, unless our boss is free, there is no way we are going to be free. If our boss himself is bound, then he cannot give us anything that will free us. But Bhagavan gives this Upamana, and obviously referring to Shankara only, that the Ishvara Shakti, the Atma Swarupa Shakti, is ever free and is shining self-luminously. And merely in its presence, the Upadhis are shining. Now I am speaking. The ego is working. Ego is the Anandamaya Kosha. The Vijnanamaya, the intellect is active, is looking for the right words and trying to remove the wrong words. Then it is picking up the data from memory. It is using Prana Shakti to give voice modulation. And it is also using the sensory organs. Now, all the curves are being used now. But then, How these movements are taking place? All in the presence of the self-luminous self. In the sannidhi of the self-luminous self. The idea is, once you are abiding in the self-luminous self, that sannidhi consumes all actions. There is no need for explanation like be an actor. Just you are only playing a role. Why it should affect you? Do it and come back. Anyway, those actions will go on. Let thoughts go on. All this is not there when we reach the Atma Sannidhi. What is the comparison? Bhagavan says in Arunachala Pancharatnam, Virikadira Yavu Virungum. Virikadira Yavu Virungum. The Sannidhi consumes the whole area of Karvis and the worlds. The instruments and the worlds which are revealed by the instruments are now completely consumed by the Sannidhi. When you go towards the Sannidhi, so there is no explanation required. How will the funds come to our organization? Will the temple be built or not? Will I go here or not? Did I go there and do it? All those are now consumed by the Sannidhi. That is the place where this is taking us. That all the instruments, the previous verse was the movements of the instruments, since we are carried away by it, we feel the Atma itself is moving. But if you drop that and come and experience the Atma Sannidhi, you will understand that all the instruments and all the worlds are going around their work, their happenings in the presence of this Sannidhi. See, the Sannidhi itself is the self-luminous light where all dyads and triads are absorbed. What are the dyads and triads? The dyads are all good and bad, the right and wrong, the cause and effect, all these dualities. The triads are seer, seeing, seen, knower, knowing, known. All that are consumed in the self-attentive, self-luminous light. In the self-attentive, self-luminous light, the Sannidhi of this Purana, all the actions are happening. So when the meaning is, the Jnana Upadesha is, when you identify with the Sannidhi, then you don't need to have any thought about how will work go on. Did I do it right? That's why when asked by Kohan or somebody that how do you know that the action you did were right? Bhagavan says, abiding in the self is the assurance that the action you did was right. Now, the secret there is that such a one does not say that my action was right, that person's action was wrong. No, because the Sannidhi of the Atma Swarupa covers the entire creation. There is no one who is not a puppet. Everyone is a puppet there. There is no doer there at all. All the actions take place, but we want an Ishvara who is not a doer, who is not caught in the trap of karma. So the example is the self-luminous, the relatively self-luminous sun, in the presence of which the actions in the world go on. Similarly, in the presence of the Atmaspurana, the I, Ahaminashabaji, Aham Taya, Spurati Hrut Swayam, Paramapurna Sat. When the ego is destroyed. Okay, let us go back to the Taittiriya Upanishad and continue. This ego is destroyed gives us an opportunity to explore that further, as we did in this morning's satsang. We had come up to the point in Taittiriya Upanishad in the 17th verse, where we had seen that though the Atma is present everywhere, it is best reflected only in the pure intellect. That is what we saw. And that is what Taittiriya Upanishad also says. But is the ego completely destroyed there? No, that is not the place where ego is completely destroyed, because Bhrigu is experiencing this Purana in the Vijnanamaya Kosha. When there is a Kosha, that means ego is still surviving. So what do we have to do there? Obviously, when we can take that such a one to whom in the intellect, in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, this Purana is coming and it is revealing itself. He has reached the Tanumanasi stage. That means the ego has become weak. At one particular point in the journey of weakening of the ego, the tables are turned and one understands that I am never the doer. No ego anywhere is the doer. Only this Purana is the doer. That which is shining in my intellect, aham, 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 that is the doer. All egos are non-doers. Such a one is the Brahmavid. That is, he has reached the first stage of Jnana. Jnana Bhumika, the self-realized one, the Jnani. In him, in the intellect, the Spurana is going on, and it has gone on to such an extent that it has removed his doership. When is one's doership gone? Only one understands, no ego is ever a doer. Is the ego destroyed there? The ego is not completely destroyed in the Sannidhi, because we still see others and feel that they are also not doers. But then when we hold that Spurana, from there on, Bhagavan says to Natanananda Swami, you cannot demand when you will do self-enquiry. Whenever memory of self-enquiry comes, you will do it. Because you are surrendered to the Ishvara, all the things are run by the Ishvara. Such a one is already living in Vaikunta or Kailasa. He will be doing self-enquiry as and when memory is given. There is no doership there also. But that self-enquiry will burn till all the koshas are burned, till the ego is completely destroyed. And that is the place where this verse comes in. That verse number 19, when the ego is completely destroyed, then it is not merely doership that's destroyed. It is individuality itself that is destroyed. Nobody is an individual. No one has doership is one thing. Nobody is an individual is another thing. That is where we merge into the Spurana. When all individualities are removed, then there is only the Sannidhi to be experienced. The aham, aham, aham is pure. There, when your individuality is completely erased and all the personalities have been erased, where is the question of how will the work go on? Who will take care? Will the food come or not? These are not there. The excuses required for those thoughts are also not there. It is only the Sannidhi into which one merges. The aham, virikadiral, yavum vilungum, aruna giriparamanmave. There, one has merged with the real Atma or the Paramatma. In Bhagavan, there is no distinction between Atma and Paramatma, because there is only Paramatma. There is only Paramatma for Bhagavan. There are no Atmas. So, once you merge, in this verse what is said, previous verse is, we mistake the Atma to be a doer and say that I did that, I should not have done this, I should be very careful, before I speak I should listen, I should have all those rules of care. All that doership is there when we go with the movement of the instruments. But then in this verse what is said, all those instruments are moving because of the Spurana, because of the Atma Shakti, and not even directly, merely in the presence of the Atma Shakti. The Upamana is the beautiful Upamana which has been taken by Bhagavan from Shankara himself, I feel, in the work Who Am I, where he says, Ishvara is like the sun, completely unaffected by the actions of the Jivas. And into that, when we merge in the Manana and Nididhyasana, where into that Sannidhi we merge, then no thought or support is required as to how a particular duty will be performed or not performed. Just like as Bhagavan says to Kohan, the silence, the being in the Sannidhi is the assurance that you have done it right. Not only that you have done it right, that everybody is all surrounded or consumed in this Ganges. We are all fish in the same Ganges. Therefore, the Ganges of grace, in that only we are all swimming. No, not even that. We are not fish in the Ganges. We are verily the Ganges itself is what we are verily that Sannidhi, we are verily that Spurana itself is what Bhagavan says. So there is no Karivi to think of. So the two verses put together can give us a meditation which can make us stick to Atma Vichara. How it can make us stick? Arey, why do I feel so bad about myself? Whether I am doing duties, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? When will I finish all this? They come because you are associated with the upadhis. So, first do Atma Vicharam and free yourself of the upadhis. How do the upadhis keep going? How do they act? They act merely in the presence of the Sannidhi. So, if you go to the Sannidhi, all the actions will be all right. Not even that. They are not there. Only the Sannidhi is only in the eyes of others. They may ask, hey, why did you do this? Why did you not do that? But for you, there cannot be. It is a responsibility. For such a one, Bhagavan says, when somebody asks, so many people are misusing the rule of Prarabdha and doing whatever they want. Is it not wrong? Bhagavan says, the rule of Prarabdha is only to give consolation to others. But for one who is in jnana, that prarabdha is not a consolation for him. He has to go to silence and be there. If silence doesn't give him entry, he should know he has made a mistake. And he cannot use the rule of prarabdha. It is by prarabdha I did that. No. If silence ejects him, he has to do the sadhana. He has to submit himself. He has to understand he has made a mistake. My individuality has cropped up again. Yeah, let me go back to the silence. And only, with knowledge comes responsibility. With the knowledge of the self comes the responsibility that you don't have any thought-based settlement. Your only place of residence is the silence of the Atma Swarupa, where no doubts arise, no solutions are asked. Even if the closest friend comes and asks, what is all this nonsense you are doing? There is no way of convincing him. There is no need. There is only settlement in the self. There is no friend. There is no enemy. It is all you. There is only you. So when Swaswarupa Anusandhanam and when you are residing in the Swaswarupa, Krityam Astikim. There is no upadhis to hold and fear. There are no things to do. Everything is full of Bhagavan. Only Bhagavan is there as the Aham, Aham, Aham. Nothing is apart from Bhagavan. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. For the next 5 minutes till 8, we can do self-enquiry and then listen to Akka. Ujjwalji, you can help us out? Okay.
नमो भगवते श्रीरमणाय।
Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramana.
Reach.
Yes, right in the beginning.
Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, we are meditating on the verses of Bhagavan in Anma bodham, which is a translation of the work of Adi Shankara Bhagavad-pada. And having covered how the body is a mixture of the Panchabhutas and going all through that, now we are in the portion where we are looking at how the mind is moving, or how we imagine there is movement in consciousness. So we are now in the sadhana section, having understood the background or the basis for our delusion. We are now further deeper into the basis for the delusion of the movement of the mind itself, or the movement of consciousness. We are see, the mind actually moves with the objects. So Bhagavan in one place says, don't run with the running mind. Don't run with the running mind. So if there is a movement, we identify with that movement. I had been to one place, some kind of a semi-amusement park, where there was a place where they could give us an experience of virtual reality. You put on some headphones actually, and you put on a goggles, and you start seeing the screen. You are standing, and what happens in that is you get a 3D experience of moving. There is a roller coaster which is moving somewhere. It's going very, 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 very fast. What are you doing? You know that you're standing. First of all, you know that you're not moving, you're standing. You put on this 3D kit. You know very well that you put on this 3D kit. You're not on any roller coaster. It's not even a dream. In the dream, we don't know that, it's a dream. But here we know. And you are given that experience of moving. And what happened? My sister Ambika was also standing next to me. She had already seen, I think, and then I was watching this, and she started saying, wait, you stop. She was telling that man, stop, because she said my body had begun to sway. I was beginning to move. My body was beginning to sway with the movements which I was watching over there. I was getting so identified with what I was seeing that I was not even able to control my physical bodily movements. I had become so identified with that. So that is how we become identified. The example is given that the moon is not moving, the moon is still, but with the movement of the clouds, one begins to think that the moon is also moving. So it is like an animation movie. The principle of an animation movie is that the things are moved so fast that the still figures appear to be moving. In a reverse context, we can say that the still figures appear to be moving, just like the still moon appears to be moving. We superimpose movement on the self. And most of sadhana, as Nandakumar ji was telling us, how to get to the deeper and deeper levels of the dhyana, by the physical getting consumed by the prana, and then by the manas, and then the buddhi, and then going to the shuddha buddhi. and experiencing the stillness in the Shuddha Buddhi. So, all sadhana is movement towards stillness. Basically, it is movement towards stillness. Stilling the mind, no matter what the sadhana is, whether if we are doing japa sadhana, what do? We keep on repeating the same name so that the mind does not go to various objects but remains with one object. And as it keeps on remaining in one object, what happens? The movement becomes less and less and less, and completely it gets stilled and merges into that single object, which is called Savikalpa Samadhi. It gets one, becomes one with that single object. At the time of the Samadhi, one will not even know that one is merged with that object, but the object is there. It is an object. No matter, sometimes the object of sadhana may be saguna, or sometimes there may be a nirguna object also in traditional practice of what is called traditionally vichara. There may be a nirguna object, like the thought that I am the self. Aham Brahmasmi. I am the self. I am all pervading. That thought may itself become a dhyana. So, what happens is that the mind goes closer and closer towards stillness. And it is said that it is reflected. This happens, and the intellect becomes purer and purer. And as it becomes completely pure, then it becomes a reflection of the self. Now, why is it that the intellect is given as the reflection of the self? Because that is the last one point, is that it is the subtlest of the conscious layers of the self. The intellect is the subtlest of the conscious layers of the self, and it therefore contains all the other aspects of the manifest entity. The Vijnanamaya Kosha, or the layer of the intellect, contains in itself all the other three koshas that come prior to it, that are lower than that. So, the purification of the intellect automatically means everything else becomes pure. And when the intellect becomes pure, what is a pure intellect? That is given to us by Bhagavan in the Arunachala Pancharatnam. Bhagavan says, Tyaktva Vishayam Bahyam Ruddha Pranena Ruddha Manasantastvam Dhyayan Pashyati Yogi Didhitim. He sees the resplendence, says Bhagavan. Tvayimahiyante. In you, or that is you, which is you, that is interpreted differently, the words Tvayimahiyante, or which is all pervading in Mahi, in the world and in the heavens. So that light is seen by the yogi, where by the purification of the intellect. How? By Ruddha Prana and Ruddha Manas, where there is no movement of the mind. So the pure intellect is defined by Bhagavan as one in which there is no movement of the mind. Such an intellect in which there is no movement, which is absolutely still or in silence, is only called by Bhagavan as the pure intellect. There what happens is, since it is pure, it is obviously bound to merge. What is pure? There can only be one pure thing, which is the Atma Swarupa. Anything other than Atma Swarupa is contamination. It is mixture. We have seen that it has got, Panchikarana. It is a mixture. Physically, it is a mixture of physical elements. Mentally, it's a mixture of mental elements. And also, even in the intellect, if there is any movement, then it is a mixture. It's a contaminated intellect. So that probably, I mean, I'm not very sure, and Nandakumarji, of course, explained to us that it is one point of awareness in the jnana, in the journey of jnana, to have the intellect being a pure reflection of the self. And it could be also, these are inexplicable, says Bhagavan. In Ramana Gita, Bhagavan says, how the self works in the jnani is known only to the jnani. The jnani may give some explanations. We may say, as in that verse, that there is the sun, it works by that energy. All that is up to a point, we may take those as explanations, because how to explain that in which there is no other? How to tell someone else that in which there is no other? But it is told. Why is it told? It is told out of compassion. Whenever a jnani gives us any explanation whatsoever, the explanation or the pointer to the self is given out of pure compassion. Bhagavan has given us all these pointers out of pure compassion, because actually there is no other. For him, there is no other. What is this pure compassion? That pure compassion is the nature of the self. So it expresses itself in that way. It just does it. Again, when the example of the sun is given, Bhagavan also says that the sun is untouched, of course, by what all happens. That Shakti is untouched, uncontaminated, unpolluted. Nothing happens to that Shakti by which everything is happening. Just the sunlight, which is a physical phenomena, as Nandakumarji also told us. Just the sunlight. And Bhagavan says, what happens? In the presence of the sun, all the actions happen. Without discrimination, but all actions happen. So the Atma Shakti enables all actions to happen. However, again, as very beautifully Nandakumarji emphasized for us today, the jnani is not worried. It is only until the point of jnana that we will worry. What happens to this? What happens to that? What happens to the world? What happens to my actions? But are these thoughts there for the jnani? Can the jnani think, oh, all this will be taken care of by my Atma Shakti? There is no such possibility, because nothing is there apart from the Atma Shakti. What is there for them to do, says Bhagavan? Krityam asti kim? What is there to do? And again in Ulladhanapad he says, who can understand? If I tell you there is nothing to be done, can you understand? Kim tasya karyam parishishtam asti? Kinchid dvija tasya sthitim bhavaitam kshamaka. Who can understand that person's state? Can it be comprehended? Even by a pure intellect, it will not. The pure intellect will not seek to comprehend. The pure intellect will not seek to grasp. The impure intellect seeks to grasp objects. When the intellect, by nature of becoming purer and purer, by turning within through self-enquiry again and again and again, by turning within through self-enquiry, when the intellect fulfills the purpose of its very existence, which is for it to get dissolved in the self, then it will automatically see its own limits. That this happens, the purest and the last question will come in self-enquiry. For whom is this enquiry itself? For whom is it? And then that will also go away, as Bhagavan says, like the pinam sudu thadi. Like that, like the stick used for burning the funeral pyre, that will also get dissolved. Until then, there may be appear to be a form. All these explanations are there to give us some support, because we are worried. We are worried about the world. We are worried about others. We are worried about actions. We are not yet, if we are not yet ready to understand or accept that nothing matters actually other than the self. Until we are in that point of acceptance, all these explanations are given to us with the equal compassion. In the earlier verses of Anma bodham also, Nandakumar ji said different examples are given even about the illusory nature of the world, according to our readiness to accept how unreal the world is. Similarly, all these pointers are given to us in keeping with our own readiness. We do not know which word, which sentence, which verse will trigger that readiness in us. So, all these examples are given to us. Each example may, for some period of time, appear to give lot of light. But Nandakumar ji again often tells us, at that point, it may release some granthi, but self-enquiry will release us from the Moola granthi, the root illusion will be destroyed by self-enquiry. Everything Bhagavan gives is a support to the self-enquiry, which itself will dissolve by His grace into the self and fulfill its purpose. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri.
Namo Ramanaka. Thank you for taking the trouble after that journey. Namo Ramanaka.
Namo.